The year is 2022 and Japan's nerd community is hyping up for a new virtual reality MMORPG. How it works is you put this thing on your head and it somehow transports you into the Matrix. So when you ninja loot stuff and call players your favorite racist gamer words, you're experiencing that racism in a whole new level of immersion never experienced before. Now on the topic of immersion, I already have a few problems with this cartoon. So this came out 10 years ago in 2012. Back when they created this cartoon, the anime syndicate assumed that in 10 years we'd be able to plug our brains into computers. This means that unless Elon Musk hurries the fuck up and comes up with something, this show is officially horribly dated. But honestly, it was dated even before 2022 started. This episode opens with a bunch of dorks lined up outside of a game store to pick up their collector's edition copy of the game, like I used to do with my friends in 2008 when a new expansion for World of Warcraft came out. Things used to be much more simpler back then. Smartphones were still relatively new. We elected our first black president and didn't think he loved drones so much. And free porn sites weren't so overwhelmed with step-sibling porn that they needed their own category. Anyway, so even though this cartoon is set in the future where you can put a thing in your head and connect your brain to a virtual world, it's still using 2012 mentality where people line up at Japanese GameStop for a box release of an MMORPG. They thought 2022 would be advanced enough that we'd have neural virtual games, but yet not so advanced that we just order all our shit from Amazon instead of going out and waiting in line for a video game. So we're introduced to the main character, Kirito, with his sick-ass 3-monitor setup and his budget Walmart PC tower. So when they made this cartoon, the anime collective didn't consider that gamers tend to trick their PCs out in the future and spend hundreds of dollars extra for the brightest, most obnoxious looking light up tower cases they can find. Also, why are there only 3 monitors? Everyone knows that 3 monitors is fucking kid gloves. You'll need at least 4 or 5 or 6 if you want to run with the bulls. Oh, and one of the monitors always needs to be sideways. Can't forget about that. So anyway, clearly Kirito doesn't seem to take gaming very seriously. He also doesn't seem to take reading magazines seriously either, because he's sitting completely stationary at his desk and he manages to cut his finger turning a page on the magazine that he's reading. We're aware of this because the cartoon zooms right on the blood dripping out of his paper cut. This detail has nothing to do with anything, and I'm convinced they put shit like this in anime just to make people feel good about themselves for watching something so deep and introspective. It's needlessly artsy and pretentious, like that asshole from American Beauty who films plastic bags. These are the same kinds of faces refer to their comic books as graphic novels. So you think they're more sophisticated than the average comic book reader. Anyway, I want to take a moment to talk about this magazine a little bit more. Is this actually a magazine, or is it supposed to be some kind of manual for the nerve gear? If it's a manual, this doesn't make sense, because later in the episode it's revealed that Kirito is a beta tester for Sword Art Online, so he'd already know how to use the nerve gear. If it's just a magazine, why the hell is he reading it right now when if he's about to start playing his new video game? It's just sitting there right on his bed waiting for him. And who reads magazines anymore anyway? Not even in 2012 when this episode came out did people read magazines. This episode takes place a decade later and the cartoon expects us to believe that kids are still reading magazines in front of their computers. I just want to stress the point that he's sitting at his desk in front of 3 fucking computer monitors, listening to a news stream, reading a magazine. Any one of these monitors could have any sort of online instruction manual or news article about the nerve gear, but they had to have him reading a goddamn magazine just so they could have an excuse to zoom in on his goddamn finger. I think the reason Kirito was reading the magazine was to show us the name of the VR equipment, while some news broadcaster in the background fills us in with some world building in the most heavy-handed way possible.
You guess what everyone's waiting in line for? Sword Art Online! The first person in line said they camped out for 3 days. Hey, but if you're a hardcore gamer, that's what
We do get to see one of the magazine pages. Now, I can't read Japanese, and maybe if I did I could tell if this was a magazine or a manual, but we do get to see a photo of the development director of Sword Art Online, Akihiko Kayababa. Now, I watched this on Netflix, so I'm going to take a moment to complain about that. Anytime an anime displays text in Japanese, Netflix will subtitle it in English so you know what the Japanese writing says. The problem with this is Netflix will only do this if you have subtitles turned off. Do you see the problem with this? If I were to be watching this in Japanese with subtitles on, like most weebs do, I would have missed this detail, which apparently is super important, that I know Kayaba looks like a dark-haired, skinny Japanese guy. Next, we get to hear Kirito's sister off-screen announce to him that she's going out for instrument practice for her musical instrument. This is done with a single shot of Kirito's closed bedroom door to show that the artists couldn't give a less about this character enough to give her a face, even though every girl in anime has the exact same face anyway, so it wouldn't have taken them that much time. I'm not sure why exactly she's telling her brother that she's going out to instrument practice, because usually kids tell their parents when they're going out somewhere instead of their siblings. But the animators were at least nice enough to draw her running out of the house, which is nice because at least now we know she's not fat. So even though Kirito beta tested this game and the game launched a week ago, he's just now going to finally start up his retail copy for the very first time. I feel like the show should have started on launch day. Adding the arbitrary detail that the game came out a week ago just makes this whole thing seem more awkward. So Kirito puts on his funny little Speed Racer helmet and logs into the metaverse.
Link start!
And what's the first thing he does when he gets online but immediately starts talking to a tree?
Hello world, I'm back!
We get the title card for the episode, The World of Swords. You're telling me that's the best name they could come up with for the first episode? Sword Art Online, Episode 1, The World of Swords? It just sounds so fucking redundant. So we're introduced to a generic-looking medieval city and are told this is Floor 1, Town of Beginnings. This game is apparently divided into different levels called floors, and apparently one of those floors is an entire city. Kirito sometimes talks about how many floors he's made it through. Like, I guess this is his power level, except this is an RPG, so he has an actual power level.
What, 9,000?
So that's probably going to get needlessly confusing real quick. Next up, we see crowds of players conversing in game, and already we witness a guy begging a lady for sex.
Well, I don't know, maybe.
Oh come on, it'll be great.
So the lady does this lame, over-the-top, bashful pose because anime doesn't know how real human beings act. So they make everybody act like they're starring in a community college play and everybody's on ecstasy. Anyway, Kirito sprints by like a bat out of hell. He's just running. And because the cartoon took us away from the main character to watch random people, I'm not exactly sure where the hell he's going. Then this other purple-haired idiot with the Minnie Mouse bow worn backwards runs after Kirito and stops him. He's out of breath from running even though this is virtual reality and nobody's actually physically running anywhere.
You act like you know your way around here.
He says, which is a weird thing to say to a stranger in any scenario that wasn't a gay bar public restroom.
You were in the beta test, weren't you?
Wait, slow down. How does this dipshit know Kirito was a beta tester? Are you telling me he gathered Kirito was a beta tester just by seeing him running somewhere? Maybe he saw all the perverts in the game begging for sex and he wanted to get away from them. The only reason he said this is because the show wants us to know Kirito was a beta tester as soon as possible and couldn't be bothered coming up with a better scene where Kirito would reveal it. It's sloppy writing. So the idiot tells Kirito it's his very first day and asks him for some tips. Kirito tells this poorly dressed asshole to f off, and so he presses his hands together in an over-exaggerated prayer pose. And again, I'm reminding everybody here that anime doesn't know how to properly illustrate real human emotion. Immediately before Kirito can refuse again, or threaten to call an adult, the idiot blurts out his name and introduces himself.
Look, my name's Klein. Good to meet you. Alright.
Now, begging and then telling somebody it's good to meet them may not get me very far asking ladies out at Macy's, but it seems to work for Klein because Kirito gives in. The cartoon immediately cuts to Klein doubled over in pain after getting gored to shit by a wild boar. This jump cut makes the previous interaction unintentionally humorous, only because it looks like Kirito took Klein out into the wilderness to get his ass kicked. Instead, the anime tries something else as a joke, and it doesn't work.
Oh, come on, seriously? You can't feel any pain.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Isn't that funny? He's being wacky. Kirito gives Klein a brief tutorial on how to play the game. He does this by picking up a nearby rock and hurling it directly into a boar's asshole. So Klein slays a boar and it evaporates into a burst of triangles like this is suddenly a PS1 game. He then goes and strikes a victory pose while the entire background is a f***ing anime seizure, and it's just so silly. Then it shifts back to the field and this idiot is still standing there in a pose and Kirito looks at him weird, and it's funny I guess because anime. Kirito then pisses in Klein's Cheerios by reminding him that it's just a low-level monster. So Klein says,
I thought that thing was a mid-level boss!
while several identical boars idly graze all around them in the middle of an open field. And it's obvious that these are just boars and there is no rational reason to think that any of them would be a
Mid-level boss!
It only took one hit to bring that boar down, for fuck's sake. Klein so far is an irritating character. I can tell he's supposed to be comic relief because he's like a total dipshit, so they just make him freak the hell out like a spastic weirdo at the slightest provocation, but that in itself is not funny. So next they talk about how many skills are in the game, to which Kirito says,
I heard the game has an unlimited number of them. All except for magic, though.
and then the topic is never brought up again. How exactly is there an unlimited number of skills anyway? Unlimited means without limit, endless, infinite. How exactly do you create and beta test an unlimited number of skills? If there's no magic, then it's not exactly unlimited, now is it? Are there skills in other weapons? In a game called Sword Art Online? Then Kirito asks the weirdest question I've ever heard.
So, what do you think? It's kind of fun to move your body as you fight, isn't it?
Oh, hells yeah!
I don't remember the last time I heard somebody say hells yeah, but it's good to know that 2005 lingo finally made it to Japan by 2022. So after that awkward interaction, the two boar boys sit on a hill and watch the sunset together. Just as two boar boys would do. This scene is framed in a way that it sounds like we're going to get backstory on who either of these assholes are, but really they just talk about the video game, and how Kirito is a beta tester. Oh, and Klein likes pizza.
Yeah, for reals, that's why I ordered a pizza for 5:30.
Wow, you're so prepared.
You know it. Besides, the game can wait until I get my pizza on.
Could that delivery have been any more robotic? And why did he say besides? He was talking about pizza the whole time. This is a problem when we have bad writing combined with bad voice talent. And I'm not watching it in Japanese either. I hate having to read my cartoons. So Klein invites Kirito out to hang out with him and his friends later on. Kirito seems a little surprised by this and says,
Yeah, sorry. Thanks anyway.
and I guess we're categorizing Kirito into the brooding by default category we can sort so many anime characters into. Klein goes to log out of the game only to find that his log out button is missing. And so is Kirito's. And it's at this point where I completely check out of the show and stop suspending all disbelief. Because the show now expects me to believe that this Nerve Gear product, which takes possession of your entire body, made it to shelves without any sort of built-in Control-Alt-Delete function. Seriously, did they pick the dumbest idiots ever to be beta testers? Because it didn't dawn on Kirito until just now that there is only one way to log out of the game. He even says there's no emergency exit procedure in the manual. You mean to tell me that in one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world, they allowed a product to go to market that can randomly hijack your entire body and hold it hostage if something goes wrong with the servers? Then Klein has another anime meltdown.
Oh my god, my teriyaki mayo pizza and ginger ale!
Why don't you just contact the Game Master?
And it's supposed to be funny because it's a cartoon character talking about eating weird shit. It's like their only inspiration for comic relief was Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Then Klein begs Kirito to let him f*** Kirito's sister.
You got a sister? How old?
And that's supposed to be funny because he's a thirsty gamer. So Kirito kicks him in the balls and it's played for laughs again because Klein once again forgets that he can't feel pain. It's annoying and out of place in a scene that is otherwise supposed to be suspenseful. Suddenly the boys are teleported to a plaza with the rest of the players in the game, and the entire sky lights up with system warnings. Then blood pours out for some reason, and a Kingdom Hearts villain comes out. This is Akihiko Kayababa, and surprise, he's the guy from the beginning. He's been pulling the strings all along. This would be an interesting plot twist to find out about several episodes in, but they decide to spoil it right up front. Kayababa reveals that if anyone dies in-game, or if anybody removes the nerve gear, their brain will be destroyed and they will die in real life. Klein is in disbelief, and Kirito explains to him that it's all true. Apparently the nerve helmet thing has a safety, and if it's disabled, the microwaves can fry your brain. Isn't that nice? I really want to know how something like this was allowed to be sold. This equipment is so dangerous that it needs a safety mechanism that apparently can be disabled through the software remotely. Did Japan really not put any sort of regulations on this thing? So Kayababa gives each player a mirror and tells them to look at it, and when they do, they change back to what they look like in real life. And since this is an anime, Klein and Kirito don't really look that much different from how they did before. Kayababa never explains why he changed everybody's appearance, and I feel like they just did this so the viewers don't feel weird getting attached to characters who end up looking entirely different if we end up seeing them outside of the game. Then Klein and Kirito have another interaction with each other that I just found bewildering. Klein asks how it's possible the game knows what they look like, and Kirito explains that the headset scans your face. This isn't the weird part. The weird part is how Kirito doesn't know how the system knows their height and frame, to the point that Klein had to remind him that they had to scan their bodies with the nerve gear. Why did that just happen? Kirito just spent the entire episode explaining everything to Klein. Why is Klein suddenly explaining how the nerve gear works to Kirito? So Kayababa continues his Bond villain monologue with his reasons for making this nightmare happen.
Ultimately, my goal was a simple one. The reason I created Sword Art Online was to control the fate of a world of my design. Okay, is that it? What's the exit strategy? What happens if most, if not all, of the players die? Nobody else is gonna join this f***ing game. I can tell you that. Have fun talking to NPCs, you f***. After Kayababa finally disappears, Kirito clenches his fist and has a little internal monologue about how everything Kayababa said must be true because the man's a genius. His thumb starts to bleed again, just to remind us of that annoying paper cut from the beginning of the episode. Which means apparently his thumb has been bleeding this entire time he was playing the game, I guess? So Kirito grabs Klein and takes him away from the crowd to come up with a plan to get strong enough to finish the game. He starts talking nonsense about how in any MMORPG there's only so much experience and money to go around, which is patently false. If that were true in SAO, or any MMO for that matter, then there would be no reason for anybody to join the game after the initial wave of players. Klein declines Kirito's help, preferring instead to go back to the plaza to find his friends. They both act as if Klein bringing more friends would be a bad thing, even though there's safety in numbers. So the two of them agree to split up, and then the weirdest thing happens. Klein shouts Kirito's name, and there's this weird, awkward sexual tension for a moment, and then he flat out hits on Kirito.
You look better like this.
Yeah, and I think that scruffy face fits you 10 times better too.
Now, I haven't watched ahead, so I'm not sure if these two are supposed to be total gay bones for each other or not, but I would imagine if they were, Klein wouldn't have been begging Kirito to let him bang his sister. But maybe this is just how boar boys act. And that's where the episode ends. I think this cartoon is pretty bad so far. The dialogue is bad, whether I'm watching it subtitled or listening to the English dub, and I have way too many questions on why anybody would design a AAA online video game that kills its players, and how they're even supposed to get away with pulling the whole thing off. It expects far too much suspension of disbelief from me, and that pisses me off. Don't make me fill in the blanks on why your bullshit TV show actually makes sense. The two characters I've met so far seem idiotic. I've already made my opinion of Klein clear, but I don't think very highly of Kirito either. He seems like a block of wood, and there's really nothing about his character that draws me in. Overall, the entire episode felt pretty empty. I'll probably watch another episode or two to see if it's worth torturing myself enough to make more videos or not. As for right now, I need a nice stiff drink, and you need to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Thanks for watching Josh vs. Anime. I already hate this.
I thought that thing was a mid-level boss.